Now, we are moving into a period of time where we are preparing for our Guru Yoga retreat, which I feel is going to be very important, and I plan on putting a great deal of effort into this retreat. It's very important to me. It is my main practice, the Guru Yoga. Not to say that I am so gifted at it, but to say that certainly it is very important to me and very precious to me and for myself. Without my connection to Guru Rinpoche, without the devotion that comes from my connection to Guru Rinpoche, I wouldn't feel as though I had many blessings in my life. This is, for me, the main light of my life, sunshine of my life. Sunshine of my life. I know there's a song about that. So this is something that I would like to share with you, and I would like to go as deep with it as possible. So in order to prepare for this Guru Yoga retreat, which is extremely important, particularly considering that we are practicing Vajrayana, and Vajrayana is the one method that provides the message or the understanding that we can indeed achieve realization within one lifetime. Now, of course, many people hear that, they think, oh, well, now I'm on the Vajrayana path, so by the end of this time, I'm going to be sitting pretty nicely. I'm going to be sitting pretty. And if we're very young when we first find the path, we think to ourselves, amazing. As young as I am, surely by the time I'm middle-aged, I'm going to be enlightened. And if we are middle-aged when we find the path, we think, amazing. Surely by the time old age hits, I will be extremely enlightened. And if we find the path when we're older, we think, well, maybe when I'm dead, I will, in transition, be able to achieve realization. But what you must understand is that while this is the potential, the path has to be practiced deeply and in a profound way, with understanding that is ever widening, ever deepening, ever expanding. One has to apply oneself to the path. This result of enlightenment isn't a given once you begin practicing the path. It's according to one's view, one's ability to pacify obstacles and to manifest those opportunities that are beneficial and helpful. And it also depends on one's ability to practice two main thoughts that are associated in the Buddha Dharma, particularly in Vajrayana, and that is the twofold understanding of wisdom and knowledge, paired with also the understanding of the bodhicitta, but then also with that is a deep and pervasive relationship to and understanding of Guru Yoga. That is extremely important. It is one of the most unique factors of the Vajrayana path. There are other elements of Buddhism in which there would be the relationship with the Guru, and that is held as precious, but not in the same regard as Vajrayana. Vajrayana has a particular relationship with Guru Yoga where Guru Yoga can be considered in a way the jewel in one's crown of practice. It pervades any practice that one does on the path. And all of the completion stage practices that are called Dzogchen practices really rely on the foundation of an excellent connection with one's teacher and an excellent awareness of the true and deep meaning of Guru Yoga. So this is extremely important, and I cannot emphasize that enough. Usually in a traditional Dharma situation, in a monastic situation, that is to say, which is the most common scenario in which one would practice Vajrayana, there is a main Lhama who is the throne holder and who has as their responsibility the transference of the lineage within that particular mandala, within that particular monastic situation. And then underneath that Lama there are many kempos, many students who are advanced students who will also help to teach. In a monastic situation, generally it is the kempos and the senior students who are able to transmit to the other students a truer and deeper understanding of Guru Yoga. And in that case, they use the Lama who is the head Lama in that particular monastery as the focus. We don't have that opportunity. So it may seem to some of you a little bit uncomfortable, as it is for me, that while I am the head Lama here in this monastery, at the same time I also have to teach the Guru Yoga. And so the reason why that is somewhat clumsy is because, in essence, if one were to look realistically, I am teaching you, the student, how to interact with me, your teacher. And so it would be better if there were other students or other Kempos or so forth who could do that, less clumsy. But we have to make do. This is America, and we'll do the best that we can. So let's play a game. Let's make it fun. As you know, the way that I like to teach is a way in which we extract the essential nectar or essence of the Buddha Dharma without changing its meaning, and apply it to situations that are familiar to Westerners, so that conceptually we can internalize better than we would if we simply describe the religion in a traditional sense, only translating the words. Because there the danger is that we would fundamentally be practicing the same religion we've always practiced, but only translating the words. Conceptually, Western religion actually is quite different from Eastern religion. And so it's difficult to do that. Oftentimes we say, oh, now I'm a Buddhist, but we are still praying to an external deity. We are still thinking of things in a Judeo-Christian sense. We are still thinking as though we were practicing a theistic religion rather than a non-theistic philosophy. And so that's quite difficult. So therefore, my choice here is to use Western examples and Western understandings so that we can internalize better. And I think it works quite well. So now let's play a game. Are there any anthropologists in the audience? Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm so sorry. No, you got me. Because the game oh, please sit down. Poor guy, I've just singled him out. How many times have you been here? Have I chosen you out to? Uh-oh. Well, I love you desperately. Don't take any of this personally. Here's what I want to say. Here's what I want to say. I know nothing about anthropology, so I have to do my legal disclaimers, particularly since he's here. So I have to do my legal disclaimers. I'm going to play a game, but you understand that this game is purely a game. It's hypothetical, truly hypothetical. I have the same, lump in my throat that I have when I try to describe the psychic inner winds and channels, knowing that there's probably medical personnel in the audience who are going to say, and where is that? So I have no idea what anthropologists know, but we're going to play the game anyway, so that's how it is. Let's pretend that we are people from the future, and we found a time capsule. The time capsule of an ancient civilization that takes place in America, specifically North America, specifically United States, and Poolesville, Maryland, which hopefully by that time will be renamed. And they will only know that this is the Poolesville general area because they'll find signs and things that are there, but nobody will remember that it was ever named after, I don't know what, a pool? I don't know what. But anyway. So somewhere in the future we find this time capsule. And here we find something that's really interesting in this time capsule. And I'm going to ask you to play this game with me and pretend that you're, well, maybe interested in anthropology, but not so expert as our friend over there. Let's say that in this time capsule, we discover that there apparently were some religious activities. And these religious activities were interesting from other digs that we've had around the country we notice that perhaps this is something new or unique or somewhat different. It doesn't seem to be the mainstream or majority religion, but it definitely seems to be religion. We find altars. We find things that look different from what you commonly find in America. One would almost think that there was some kind of, oh, I don't know, bridge or connection between America and some place out there, maybe, I don't know, some eastern place like Nepal or Tibet or India. Maybe some of the things that we find style-wise and information-wise seem to connect with that area. But still in all, this seems to be very American. We notice that when we dig up the altars as anthropologists, we find that on the altars are these figures. And when we examine these figures, it's kind of interesting because it seems that in this place in Poolesville, there were predominantly Caucasians, African Americans, not that many Asians. Yet here on this altar, there are people with Oriental eyes and a very Asian look. Wonder what we'd think about that. That's pretty interesting. Wonder what that means. But then we dig a little bit more and we find out, let's say, that there was a teacher in this place, and the teacher in this place was not at all Asian. In fact, we find evidence that while this teacher was teaching, that she, apparently she was a female, sat on this throne and she taught and had different religious and ritual activities from what information we can gather. But interestingly, she looked very much like the students that she taught. We find that she lived nearby. And that nearby, you found, just a couple of garments like the traditional ones, like the chubas that one finds in modern Tibet and Nepal. So we find a couple of garments like that, and we find in her house also a meditation room with many ritual objects there. But then we look in her other closets. And let's see, we find all kinds of interesting things. We find there must also be some connection with, well, Western America too, because there are cowboy hats in there. There are, we assume they're cowgirl hats, but you know, it's too far in the future, we don't know. There are Western boots. There are these denim pants, really interesting denim pants that seem to have been around in this country for such a long time, with that Levi stamp on the back that is so unique and that so no one ever removes, even though it's all stiff and tattered. So there's this funny cultural thing going on there. And we find that she has all these clothes that are associated with business of that time, like suits and different kinds of objects like that. Really interesting that this person who was the main teacher there isn't anything like the main teachers that we found in monasteries we've dug up, in Tibet and in India. Yet many of the things are the same. Again, the altars, the Asian flair. How did all of this happen, and what can we assume from this? This is really interesting because, you know, every single culture has its ideal and it has its own particular awareness of what is current and what is conventional and what is contemporary. Every single culture has its own particular appearance and flavor, every culture and every time. Am I right so far, Mr. Anthropology? Oh, okay, thank you. Show him out before I ever get down. So different cultures have times associated with their, have looks associated with their time and different information that we connect with that time. And yet here there seems to be some kind of bridge. Well, here's the question I want to ask you, and here's the game we want to play. If you were looking at such a time capsule, what are some of the thoughts that you might have? Well, as I've mentioned, you might think that there was a bridge happening somewhere. You might think that there was a connection or a movement from one culture to another, or some kind of blending. You might see that information has crossed barriers, has crossed cultural barriers, has crossed areas. You might not, because if it's far enough in the future, you might not actually know how that happens, depending on what information you've actually found. But you can see that things have crossed. You can see that things are moved. Now, if you were not only anthropologically hip, but also the kind of person that thinks about things deeply, that really chews on things, eats them up, is interested in things, has that kind of perky mind, and maybe even has a really good smattering of mysticism. The kind of person who really likes to think on a deeper, abstract, mystical, and even human level. What makes things connect and what makes things tick? What makes things go the way they are? Perhaps you might notice that while the entire format here seems to be very Eastern, there are also these things that seem to be both Eastern and Western. It seems that the books that we found have both Eastern and Western information, and while they are primarily about the Buddha Dharma, the textbooks have a translation there, Tibetan, and then we also see transliteration, and then we see English. But then that interesting figure who sits on the throne, that leader, she seems to be a Western woman. She seems to look exactly like them, unless she's actually fulfilling some kind of obligation, some sort of Dharma obligation. What does this mean? Here we are, we're really thinking about this, and we're trying to decide on a deeper level. Well, supposing we add to that another dollop of information. We find out that in this particular tradition that is being practiced, it seems that a very important, almost foundational concept is the concept of the rebirth and finding of and continued authority of this tulku system, or a system where lamas accomplish dharma and then are reborn as bodhisattvas in the future in order to benefit sentient beings. So there's this tulku system that's going on. And yet here is this woman who's a Westerner teaching this Western thing. We've uncovered that she has a crown and a robe, all specially saved. Let's think really deeply about this. What could this mean? With all of the information that we have, particularly about the habit of cultures to represent themselves in pictures or to represent the ideal in pictures and so forth, how is it that everything here is so Eastern, yet this woman is Western, taking in the idea of this tulku system? What does all of this mean? If it were me, and I had a really good smattering of the sense of the mystical, and I were the kind of person that really liked to think in abstract conceptualizations, and were the kind of person that had the habit of reaching for penetrating insights, deeper insights, I might assume from this scenario that being as though she seemed to be of the same race as the students that she was teaching primarily, it might be, with all of these factors intact, that something really remarkable was going on here. And we might assume something about the students from this information. In fact, I think we would assume more about the students and more about the growth and transition of this religion than we would about the teacher. I think we would assume about the students, or at least I would assume about the students, that they were connecting or toying with, or somehow that it was a factor that the students might consider themselves capable of achieving realization. I might think that, because if this teacher, according to the information that we've gathered, is considered to be, whatever, realized, a bodhisattva, and she appears in the world as them, considering the belief in the tulku system, if this occurs, and this person is chosen and recognized to be a teacher for these Westerners, what is the communication? The communication is that this religious gathering, this spiritual event, is geared towards these Western students, and that there is something that is visible, or that one can assume. I'm looking for a turn of phrase here that I can't quite get my hand on. One can assume that there is some kind of connection between the Western faces of the students and the Western face of the teacher. Why is this the case? Why is this happening? Why isn't there a Tibetan teacher teaching this Tibetan subject? Why is this recognized tulku a Westerner? I would assume that there is some special connection between that student, those students, and that teacher. That there is a subtle, under the surface message here. There is a communication that says, while the Buddhas appear as Easterners in these statues, and that is one set of facts or information, there is also another bit of information that is being displayed here. And that is that wisdom, or bodhicitta, or perhaps realization, perhaps Buddhahood, however you want to put it, whatever it is these people were going for, also appears as a Westerner, with a face like them. I've been thinking about this a lot. If I saw this in a time capsule, this is what I would assume was occurring here. This is what I would see. Because I would pick up how interesting it is that all of these things are so Eastern, and yet this is in a Western place, and this Western transference is happening. I would assume that at least this is a distinct possibility. Now, if we play this game and we ask ourselves, could one assume this? Could one assume that there is a real bridge happening here, a transformation from one culture to another, and that the message that is being conferred here is that this is for you? This is for you, the Westerner. There is a connection here. Now Buddhism becomes also an American thing. Now Americans are doing it. There is an American teacher, and she is held up as being a wisdom dakini, a wisdom emanation. You wonder if in that day and age when all of this was occurring, how those Western students felt about a Western teacher. They might have thought, well, this is cool, I can understand her better. Or maybe they might have thought, well, this is not authentic. You see, it can't be authentic because she's not one of them. She doesn't look like the guys on the altars. She's not even a guy. So how authentic can it be? So they might have thought that. Or they might have thought, well, I'm looking for the face of my true nature. If they picked up any Dharma books that really conferred information on the Dzogchen level, they might understand that the game plan here is to awaken to one's own primordial wisdom nature, in essence, seeing one's true face. That there might be something very profound about the fact that the students are Western, and so is the teacher, different from the system. They might puzzle about it a great deal. They might not know exactly what's going on, but these are some of the thoughts that might happen. I certainly would think like that. What would you think? What would you wonder about the people of that time? It reminds me a little bit of when I go out to Arizona and I visit the Indian ruins. And you see the artifacts that they've gathered and look at the ruins, and then you hear the assumptions that are made. They have many national park centers where what has been dug up is displayed, and all the assumptions that are made about this period of time because of these artifacts that are brought up are discussed. And you can see how they gather information, how these scientists gather information. And the assumptions that are made about certain structures. But there's no real information that says, that's kind of like a manual that one gets when putting together a toy that comes in many parts that says, all right, part A is this, and part B is this, and part C is this, and this is how A, B, and C all connect together. We have to make assumptions. And so this, I think, would be an interesting thing to see in a time capsule in the future. But what's really important is what you, who are at this time, are thinking about this. In the future, scientists may dig us up and puzzle us out, and they may have all kinds of ideas. Some of them might be really cool. Some of them might be right on the money. Some of them might be really fanciful and out to lunch. But you who are here, present at this time, in this exotic place, doing this thing that is not a front runner in your society, doing something that has a very Eastern flavor, but in this Western contemporary setting, with this Western contemporary teacher, what do you think about it? Unfortunately, the problem is that we don't think about it. We don't think about it enough. Because if we did, we would begin to understand that there's a very, very important factor here that we need to come to grips with. We need to understand. That should make us as Dharma practitioners feel at home. That should make us as seekers have a new handle we can grab that helps us to understand on a deeper level, not just an apparent or superficial level, what is happening here, what is the message here, what's happening here. What do you think when you realize that you are doing this odd thing in this foreign role, in this contemporary setting, with this contemporary teacher teaching you this odd thing? What do you think about that? I wish you would give this some thought. This is very important to you, and it will give you an understanding, a handle, some way to connect with Guru Yoga practice much better. If you could only open your eyes and get the lay of the land as it is, it would really help. Because this is an information, this is a message about you. This is a message about you. What's happening here is that once teacher appears, and again, this is from the Dharma perspective and specifically from the Vajrayana perspective, where pure view and deeper understanding is absolutely essential. For one of the first times that we know about, suddenly these students are being taught by someone who is recognized as a bridge, as having that innate wisdom, as being one of those lamas that is necessarily found, that must be found, in order to perpetuate this particular religion, but looks like you, exactly like you. If you think about this, the message here could be, should be, hope it is, the greatest joy of your life. And that is that this is about me, you. When we're talking about who can achieve realization, who can accomplish the precious awakened state, and we see how this transmission comes to us in the world, when we see the appearance of the deliverance of that path, when we see the appearance of the Buddhanature in the world, appearing as the Bodhisattva, our teacher, when we see the appearance of the path in the world, when we see the appearance of this entire scene in the world, we see that it looks like us. So, if this appearance of Buddhanature looks like us, if the appearance of the path looks like us, then the appearance of the result must also look like us. Think about it. What does your altar look like? Well, it has Asian Buddhas on it. What does your heart look like? What does the altar in your heart look like? Does it honor something that is foreign? Does it see something that isn't anything like you? Or is it possible that somehow, subtly, through this event, you are gradually understanding that this is in fact about you? Because one of the philosophical understandings that we grapple with as we enter onto the path of Dharma is that the seed, which is the mind of enlightenment or Buddhahood, and the path, the method, and the fruit or result are indistinguishable from one another. Indistinguishable. They are interdependent, inseparable, and indistinguishable. So the appearance of the Buddha Dharma in a form that looks like us, talks like us, lives like us, acts like us, is a way for us to understand that the face of our true nature, the face of Buddhahood, is us. That is our face. Now, in this contemporary time, when this ancient thing is being taught, we see the appearance of our face. How amazing. Yet, unfortunately, what actually happens, and here's the tragedy of our modern time. This time is Kali Yuga. This is the time, actually, that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas speak of as moral and spiritual decay. When we read the papers, we realize that this is not flawed thinking, that nowadays it is difficult even to do something as American and apple pie as send our children to school safely. And yet, in the midst of all of this, comes this appearance, this miracle, this message to us. It should be a message of empowerment. And yet in this time of Kali Yuga, and because this is a human realm, and one of the causes of being born as a human, other than the virtuous causes. One of the non-virtuous causes of being born as a human is doubt. Here, instead, we see our own face. We see this ancient practice which has been proven to produce enlightenment in so many uncountable Vajra practitioners, and is being practiced here purely, without mistake, without fault, is being practiced here. And yet when we see that our teacher looks like us, instead, we experience doubt. Must not be authentic, isn't Tibetan. Also, it's a woman. How good can that be? Good. But we don't have the perspective of time. We are now in the middle of this transition. The transition hasn't already happened. We're not on the other side of it looking back and saying, oh, this was the moment when this event happened. When the Buddha Dharma actually took root in the West as us, became our thing, and we achieved realization. We don't have the perspective of time. We are in the middle of that transition now. And we don't know how to think. Yet here we are, we're looking at this face that looks like us, and then we look at this face on our altar, and we don't know what to think. How amazing, how weird. Try to understand what that means for you in terms of your own beginning practice of Guru Yoga. How amazing to be able to practice the Guru Yoga so much more deeply. Because one of the things that we learn when we practice Guru Yoga is that the teacher becomes for us not somebody you should be, acting strange around. Not somebody that you have to engage in all this ritual dance with so much as an appearance that is a mystical appearance. We understand through the practice of Guru Yoga that the teacher represents for us our own enlightenment. The appearance of our own true face, born in the world just like us. We are taught that when we actually meet with the teacher on the path, we should recognize that we have at last placed our feet on the course where we see our own true face. The teacher represents the very appearance of bodhicitta in the world.
No.